Hello, in today's Straight Talk, I want to talk about the subject of being real. When I refer to being real, I'm talking about our true, authentic self. Do we show up in our lives and our relationships as our true, authentic self? Or do we show up with a mask? Or do we show up with a mask in certain scenarios and more authentically in others? Or are we able to be our true selves in every environment we might find ourselves in? So whether it's in relationship to a partner or a friend or a sibling or a parent or a child or professionally, in every environment, can we be our true selves? Or have we learned to so deeply censor ourselves in order to be acceptable that we're just walking on a tightrope all the time, trying not to upset certain sensibilities in somebody else? Or can we be our real, true, authentic self in every situation? There's a lot of growing up required, I believe, in order to reach that stage in life where we can be our true, authentic selves in every environment. Because we do have to get along with other people and we do have to fit in almost any environment. But we've learned to be very fragile around fitting in. Because we were taught this all of us were taught to conform with certain expectations, certain family expectations or social expectations or expectations of an employer or to get certain clients if we're self-employed and all of that kind of thing. So there's a very fine line between being acceptable and being authentic. You may well have heard of Dr. Gabor Mate, who talks about the tender ground between being acceptable and having our need for attachment met and being authentic, which affects our attachment almost to ourselves, to our true selves. Because when we behave in a way that's acceptable to somebody else, that really truly conflicts with how we see ourselves, we can end up really detached from ourselves and feel like, I don't like who I am because I can't be my real self. I might feel like I'm being a fraud because it's not okay for me to show my true feelings in certain relationships. So it's a really important subject because it can lead us into being so deeply detached from who we truly are that we don't like who we are. And I would contend, I think, that most of us live that life detached from who we truly are because we have to conform to fit in. And the pressure to conform seems to me to be growing ever stronger because of the censorship that's going on in the world right now. And it's huge. We're being stopped. There are people who I find quite interesting to listen to online who talk in a way that I feel is really authentic. It's based in truth, provably so in many cases. And yet the big tech platforms, social media, are removing people's access to that platform, even if they've got followings of millions of people, because we don't like what you're saying. So there's somebody there pulling the strings and controlling what's going on. And it's like, if you dare to say that, if you dare to speak up, if you dare to share your opinion, we're going to shut you down. And it's even got to the point where we're going to put you in prison in certain cases. But that's kind of a bigger umbrella picture of what I'm talking about. I'm really referring to the up close and personal, deep down, are we being our true, authentic selves? So if you think about friendship, let's say, can you talk and be your authentic truth, your authentic self in every situation? So with my parents, with my siblings, with my children, with my partner, with friends, with work colleagues, can you always be your authentic self? Or do you have a mask to wear with parents, with siblings, with friends, with children, with work colleagues? Do you see what I mean? If you have to behave or conform in certain ways with certain expectations in order to remain acceptable, how acceptable are you to you in that mask wearing act that we put on, that you might be putting on? I think we all do it. And I question how useful or healthy it actually is to do that, to live that way. So if you go, let's think, just imagine you might be feeling like you want to go see a mushy film, or you might be feeling rage at a certain scenario that's going on in your life. You might be being treated really unfairly, and because you can't express, or you don't feel safe expressing how you feel, you can't express it. So it becomes like, when you think about sweeping something under the rug, eventually when you keep doing that over and over and over again, how we refer to it, that it becomes kind of a mountain, and it becomes crazy. You can't avoid it. It's an elephant in the room. And what damage is that doing to you when you feel you can't express how you feel? And I do feel that very often relationships flounder because we didn't dare express our truth, how we really felt. Or, and it became either too big to contain, and we blew up, and, it caused such a repercussion that the relationship becomes irrecoverable, either because you can't continue to live the life you were living before, or the other person can't accept you in your truth, and they, that there's a natural division takes place there. Or it could be that somebody blew up to such an extent that they physically harmed somebody, or did something that, would be considered a crime. Coercive control is a crime. Now, for somebody to continually bully you, verbally, mentally, emotionally, and I'm talking not physically, that is actually a crime. Now, it seems to me to be very difficult to prove, but we know that we all know of cases where there's a very well-known one. I can't remember the lady's name now, but she ended up murdering her husband because he'd been doing this to her for years and years and years, and she finally snapped. I think she was imprisoned, but I think she was freed early. Her sons, I believe, campaigned for her to be set free because of the intense bullying she'd experienced. That's not to say it's forgivable to kill somebody. There has to be a step before that, or various steps before that. That's actually the domain I work in. So training people to find other ways to deal with abusive situations, which, I'm not going to go into that now, but there are ways of avoiding things coming to the extreme rather, where we might act out in a way that's dangerous to somebody else or ourselves. So are there people that you have to choose according to what they'll tolerate from you? So if I'm feeling angry, is there a friend amongst my friends that I can turn to and express that and know that I won't be badly thought of? If I feel afraid about something, is there a particular friend I could turn to that I can show that to and know that they'll be okay with it? The danger in that is that our friendships can become restrictive to us. So let's say there's a friend who can deal with me, I can talk to if I feel really low, but they can't deal with me when I'm coming out of that, when I've managed to sort out how I feel. And, if you just think about emotions as like a tidal wave, or a tidal wave. I don't mean a tsunami. I'm talking, although there can be that, I'm talking about ebb and flow. So emotions ebb and flow. They're not meant to stick. We're not meant to always be in a particular emotion. So if we're not allowed to express anger, let's say, because it's a good one to identify at the moment what I'm talking about. So if we're not allowed to we're not allowed to express anger, it can, and lots of people can't deal with the expression of anger. So we may become so repressed around our feelings of anger that we become a danger to our own health. So because we don't express it, we turn it inwards. So we may start to drink, we may start to have unhealthy habits to suppress those things that want to come up and need to come up, because feelings are an energy, a very, very powerful energy. No matter what the feeling at the end of it is, they are very powerful energies. So if we keep repressing or suppressing feelings of anger, as an example, that energy has to go somewhere. So it may be that we become depressed. So we're depressing our natural expression that needs to come out. If it was able to come out, it would likely come out and then go. You know, you hear people talk about fight and flight, that when an animal, say, is under threat of being killed by a predator, let's say a gazelle or something like that, sees a lion and it's going to be hunted by this lion. If it doesn't get the hell out of there quickly, it's going to be eaten alive. You know, and I know I believe there's a way the body behaves to send us into shock, where we are not going to feel that in the way that we might feel it, or the way we might think we would feel it. So the fight part of it would protect us from the trauma to some degree as we're being eaten alive. I hope that's the case anyway. So the gazelle sees a lion in the long grass, and all the fight or flight mechanism begins to take place in our body. So the right chemicals flow to take energy away from our brains and our viscera, so we're not immobilized, and it all goes to the arms and legs, so we can flee, and we can flee with much more energy than we might ordinarily feel. So the animal flees, and it gets away from the lion drops off and thinks, I'll find easier prey or whatever. But the gazelle will often shake once it stops. Once the danger is past, it will shake physically, and the energy will be whatever remaining energy there is, flight energy, the hormones of adrenaline and what have you, cortisol and all of that, is dispelled from the system, and it can then return the energy. The hormones can begin to activate the right parts of the body. So the gazelle returns to grazing. It's going to need the right kind of chemicals going on in the viscera, so it can, process the food it's taken in. In real life, in our real lives, those stresses and strains that we deal with are very often perceived threat rather than actual threat. And we may never actually dispel that energy. And it can become then depressing, a depressing energy, and send us into all sorts of unhealthy states where, it's not healthy to suppress and repress energies. Sickness, and again, I refer to Gabor Mate. A lot of the work he does and talks about is about ill health and how that ill health comes about. Like he talks about people who get Lou Gehrig's disease, which we know in the UK as ALS. You may remember was it ALS? But the cold water challenge thing that was going on to raise money for that and to raise awareness of it. That very often research has been done to show that very often people with ALS are very nice people who don't rock the boat, who don't speak up about their anger and frustration. Cancer's been very strongly linked to unexpressed anger. And these are just, I can't talk with any authority about those things. I'm just talking about the reading I do and the things I listen to and what have you. So if you think about repressing or suppressing your natural feelings, and we're using anger for the moment, then you are turning what should be an expressible emotion into a harmful, unexploded bomb in your system that, because it keeps being repressed, it's being swept under the carpet effectively, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it results in either an explosion or, we become so suppressed that we just don't feel alive anymore, and, we're depressed. But if we have, let's say, one friend who we can do depression with, but that friend can only tolerate depression, they're very good at, maybe every time you talk to them, they're going to be, how are you doing? Are you all right? Are you sure you're all right? And that can become really irritating, because you're like, that's past for me now. I'm okay now. I'm back in, I'm feeling okay. If we're allowed to do that, to ebb and flow naturally in our friendships, then we're going to recover quickly. We're not going to get sucked up into a particular emotion. If you think about, if you're straight after a funeral, let's say, that I'm sure most of us have been through losses in our lives, particularly the older we get. When you're in the initial aftershock of just having found out that somebody you love deeply has passed away, in whatever circumstances, you're kind of in a form of shock, particularly if it's something that's really an unpleasant. I mean, I don't know that there can be a pleasant death, or maybe there can. I don't know. Maybe we can, prepare for things in a better way. But if we know it's coming, sooner rather than later, in ill health or something like that, say. But in the normal way that we deal with the shocking news of somebody's passing, we are so raw and so disoriented in the hours afterwards. And if we gather with other loved ones, which is certainly in my experience is what happened, you kind of come together and you're trying to understand what's happened, trying to make sense of it, trying to deal with it, trying to take in this new reality that is going to be life-changing for you. It messes with your sense of reality. And in the hours afterwards, we can be so incredibly raw that all thoughts of fakery and mask wearing are out the window, because we're just in the moment. We're very often, certainly again in my experience, I've lost people close to me a number of times. There's a rawness that we have to go through, but we go through it together. So we might be laughing hysterically one minute, remembering something wonderful, but sobbing deeply the next. And we're doing it together. How often do we do that together? How often are we able in normal life, when we're not going through a grieving process, how often can we be that in the moment, that we just let it wash over us, let that emotion flow? It comes in and it goes out, and it comes in and it goes out. And in that way, we can process it very naturally. So we're being our true selves, and we're for ourselves and for each other, although it's not for anything when we're going through grief, because it's just happening. It's just involuntary. We're in the emotion. But in a friendship, say, in a normal everyday friendship, the normal everyday goods and bads, and as we judge them, experiences that happen to us, we're able to process much more naturally with each other, if we can be accepting of emotion as an ebb and flow process. And we'll, rather than shut somebody down, because I don't do joyful, I can deal with depression, I'm all right with that, because that's my level. And I'm not knocking that, please understand. I'm just saying that this can happen. So if I'm with a friend, say, that can do, or somebody in my circle that can do that depressing stuff, but they can't handle us when we're upbeat, when we're recovered, because that's too much for them. Or if we're with somebody who is always upbeat but can't do the depressing stuff, we might feel, I can't talk about that with this person because I know they won't be able to handle me, to handle what I'm going through. And they can't handle the ebb and flow of me. They can only handle this aspect of me. And we ourselves may be being that way in our friendships. So we're being, we're not being our full true selves. And learning to be our true selves is a life's work when you've been conditioned to, I've got to be this way to be acceptable, or that way to be acceptable. Because being whole, being all of me, being ebb and flow can get people a bit, oh, what are you? You're depressed, or are you happy, or, what are you? When the truth is, well, actually, I'm all of those things. I once wrote a blog post. I have a blog called thestraighttalkblog.com, where I raised the subject of, I was talking in a group I was in at the time about, is it okay for women to be angry, to express their angry feelings? And what I wrote about was how people tend to say, if somebody's angry, they've got an anger issue. Now, if you've got an anger issue, you're probably going to be angry all the time and not able to relate in any other way. But when you ebb and flow and you're able to safely and acceptably express anger, if there is such a thing as acceptably in the culture we're in, you can express that anger and have it roll through you or wash over you or whatever, and then you can return to homeostasis and just be, all aspects of you can come and go, and your friend can accept you, or friends can accept you in that. I'm all of these things, but there's this thing about, you've got an anger issue and you might only have anger for 5 minutes, and you've expressed it and it's out. But some people might perceive that as you've got an anger issue. And my response, the way I wrote about it in my blog was, I've no more got an anger issue if I express anger than I've got a happiness issue, or a playful issue, or a mischievous issue, or a sad issue. We kind of latch onto these things as if that's your whole character, and it's not. If we could just accept one another in the moment and allow those emotions to ebb and flow and wash over and, to come and go from both sides. So, my friend might relate to a particular issue I'm experiencing, and it might be something that's troubling, and they might share an experience of theirs that was troubling. But the next minute you're both laughing because you're able to keep it in perspective. It's the latching on that keeps it not in perspective and turns us into mask-wearing individuals. So I have to wear this mask with this person, or in this circumstance, or in relationship with people at work or whatever. You have to, I've worked in environments where leave your personality at the door. Don't bring that in here. Don't bring that playfulness in here. Don't be having a laugh with your colleagues. We're not having that here, which is a pretty shit way for an employment life to go. I mean, if you're in work and you've got to be serious all the time, how much are you going to enjoy that job? How much loyalty will you have to that employer if you've got to be as miserable as sin and not have a laugh and not be playful with people on the phone if you work on the phone, say? We've got it all messed up in this repression and suppression of certain characteristics, that only this kind of behaviour is acceptable here and only that kind of behaviour is acceptable there, or with these certain people. I think we really have to think about, how do we become more of who we authentically truly are in all circumstances. So my brother, my friend, my boss, all know me as the same person. I think that's a gift. It's something that we have to work hard to achieve. Some people seem more natural about it than others, but a devil may care personality may just naturally have it. I don't really care. I'm just who I am, and that's great. And people love those kind of people. But I think we really have to think about, how do we become more authentic more of the time with more people, so that we can be our healthiest, most alive who we are. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for now. I've kind of waffled on for 25 minutes, and that wasn't the plan. I'm trying to keep these things shorter as I, begin to put more videos out there and share with the world my truth. So I hope that's been useful. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and I welcome comments. I would prefer that people comment, here I am, restricting maybe, but, for comments to be kind and thoughtful and respectful, and not to become aggressive and argumentative. This is just sharing a view and, putting it out there to invite people to be more who they really are, in order that they can be happier, healthy, more productive people. Anyway, I'll leave it there for now. Look forward to speaking to you again. Bye.